fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror films and Giallo films. And this is another Giallo that I've actually seen before, but I haven't seen it in like 8 or 9 years probably. It was one that I used to own that long ago, and then it was one that somehow went missing or got stolen or whatever. And then I finally rebought it recently, and I've been very excited to rewatch it because I didn't really remember much at all. And it is Lucio Fulci's 1971 film, A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Now, I know there is a new Blu-ray out of this that I hear looks great and has some good features. This is actually the same DVD that I had before, put out by Shriek Show. No reversible cover. It was cheap, and I really just wanted to have it again. This is also one of the first 5 or 6 Giallos that I had ever seen. This was when I was first really getting into Giallo. I also saw this back when I was really getting into Lucio Fulci. And I actually decided to see this because I knew this was really the first film where he really became known for his gore. Of course, it's still not to the level of Zombie or City of the Living Dead. But I will say the gore scene that is in this still holds up. I didn't think it would, but it does. And I still very much enjoy this Giallo. I'm not sure if I like it more than Don't Torture a Duckling. I think I may. But, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and I was very glad to revisit it. Now, it stars Florinda Balkan, who is our lead, and she played the chastised gypsy from Don't Torture a Duckling. And we also have Stanley Baker, Gene Sorrell, Alberto Di Mendoza, Penny Brown, Ellie Galliani, who was in $5 for an August Moon. And this is actually kind of similar to All the Colors of the Dark, because it deals with very psychedelic, trippy dreams and nightmares, not being able to discern dreams from reality, and paranoia, and sort of falling into madness. I will say I probably like that Giallo a little bit more. This is definitely more of a straightforward Giallo, even more in the sense that you actually have law enforcement trying to solve this murder, which doesn't always happen in Giallo. A lot of times it is people outside law enforcement. So it is a bit more streamlined than the Martino film. But I do think it's very well written, which was written by Fulci, Roberto Gianviti, Jose Luis Martinez Mola, Andre Tranche, which a lot of those guys have wrote a number of different Giallos, Seven Blood-Stained Orchids, among a lot of them. And the special effects was done by Franco Di Girolamo and Carlo Rimbaldi. Now, and actually, this was the first film in which an effects artist had to prove his effects in court were fake. And that is during the infamous dog scene, which I'll wait till I get into spoilers before I actually describe it. Carlo Rimbaldi actually did bring in the props and say, see, these are all fake. it's not real what you see on the screen, and it was all dropped. I, kind of similar to Ruggero Deodato and Cannibal Holocaust. I think that story is definitely a lot more notorious. So I think that movie's a lot more known for that than this one is. But this was actually the first time that ever happened. Now, the story for this takes place in somewhere in England. And we have Florinda Balkan, who plays Carol Hammond, who is the daughter of a politician who's also a lawyer. His name is Brighton. His last name is Brighton. Her husband Frank is a lawyer that works for his practice. They have Joan, who is Frank's teenage daughter from a previous marriage, which she's played by Galini, who was in $5 for an August Spoon. Brighton is played by Leo Gann, and Gene Sorrell plays Frank. And they live in this huge apartment building where down the hall they have this very eccentric, decadent young neighbor named Julian Durer, played by Anita Strindberg, who, of course, has been in Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Had the Key, Who Saw Her Die, Case of the Scorpion's Tail. And she's known to host these wild parties that involve loud music, drugs, orgies. And of course, this came out right at the end of, the Flower Power. And actually, the movie opens up with a very trippy dream sequence. And I do like the way Fulci films these dream sequences. I will say there's a lot more going on in them than All the Colors of the Dark dream sequences, where it just seems like a dark stage production with just a few characters. Here, there's a lot going on. It feels like a segment from Pink Floyd's The Wall a lot of times. It shows Carol running through crowds of people, but there's a lot of mirror effects, lots of slow motion, lots of running through naked people. And then we also see after that she's talking to her psychoanalyst about these dreams and how her neighbor who she's never met keeps appearing in them. And then there's this great scene with this very loud party with the live band. And it shows Julia and all her friends, orgies, drugs. And then we see the Hammonds, who are having this very quiet, very ultra-conservative dinner. But we just hear the music blaring. And we see the look of frustration on her face, on Carol's face. And then that night she has this other dream where she does come to Julia, and it all ends with her brutally stabbing her to death. But there's also great moments where there's this giant swan in the sky that has some sort of animation on the ground, the shadow of the swan is chasing Carol. Also, she talks to her psychoanalyst about this lesbian affair that either she doesn't know if she wants or not, but it's a theme that pops up in her dreams. In her dreams, she stabs Julia. She looks up and she sees these white-eyed hippie couple just staring at her who saw the whole thing. And then the next day, coming to find out, Julia has been stabbed to death in the exact same manner as Carol's dream. And that's what the whole case is built around. So, is Carol guilty? Is it split personality? Can she really not tell dreams from reality? Also, her husband Frank gets entangled with it, as does her political father, and it's a as well as the hippies. The hippies also do play a big part in it. It's just a wild, twisty, turny film where I will say, for one that has as many twists and turns as this does, it is one of the better written ones. I will say that as far as Giallos go. So with that, I'm gonna get into spoilers, but I do highly recommend this. If you're a fan of Fulci, but if you're a fan of Fulci for his gore, that's very minimal in this, because I do believe this was his first film where he really did have elaborate gore effects. And it really is, there's a scene with a tiny bit of blood and gore, and then there's the big one that kind of got him in trouble. The one with the dog scene. Which I still think those hold up. But, so don't go into it thinking you're going to get a New York Ripper or City of the Living Dead. But it is a very well-written Giallo. It is very... It also feels just a lot like a police procedural, because, again, we do have law enforcement trying to solve this case. And, yeah, if you like movies with twists and turns, then you'll like this. Also, it's just a great-looking movie. I love how... And I hope the Blu-ray still has this. It's mostly during her dream sequences. I didn't notice it too much in reality. But the look of the film still has the cracks and pops and imperfections of the film itself, which I love. I hate it when films get restored and it clears all that up. I really find that blasphemous. So, yeah. Definitely really like this Giallo, but I'm going to get into spoilers now. All of this kind of kicked off with a phone call to Brighton from Julia saying, I have some very incriminating information about a member of your family. And then the phone line gets cut. Brighton seems to think it's Frank is responsible because he's having an affair with his secretary. He thinks Julia was going to blackmail him for money about the affair. So his eyes are set on Frank and how all the evidence is there to create this murder based on a dream to incriminate Carol. And then, of course, the hippies are wanted, and then for a while we even think it's Joan. We do get several scenes where the hippie does they call him the red-haired hippie, who's a guy named Hubert. He does show up at several points. He's kind of like the Ivan Rasimov of All Colors of the Dark. Very long chase scene between the hippie and Carol. But at first, she is taken away to this one clinic for a while to be evaluated. And that's when she sees the hippie being chased, and she ends up in this room with all these dogs who were strung up, and they're still alive, they're still whimpering, and their chest and they're completely disemboweled, or at least open, and their lungs and hearts are still pumping, and it's still a great effect. I mean, I can see, especially for 71, why people would think that was real. And then Brighton is able to, also being a lawyer, he's also to take his version of the case that it was Frank, and it's enough to get Carol bail, or to be released on bail. So he takes Carol out to his countryside home. she's approached by the hippie girl of the couple saying, meet the guy at this church. He'll tell you who's gonna, who we saw kill Julia that night. But it leads into a chase in which he's gonna kill her. But she's saved by police. He's chased off. And then we see that Joan, who's trying to help clear her father's name, is going to meet the hippie. But she's found dead. She was killed by the hippie. And then the cops bring the hippie couple back to Julia's apartment where they can give their story, where he admits that he did kill Joan and tried to kill Carol, but they were so high on LSD that who they saw kill Julia was a lizard in a woman's skin. And I do like how that's the title. I love when Giallos will take a little tiny clue or a line of dialogue and make that the title. That kind of gives away who the killer is. Because I think it was America, it was released as Schizoid, which 10 years later there would be a slasher film named Schizoid, which I have reviewed. In France, it was released as Carol. Okay. But, yeah, I do think Lizard and Woman's Skin is the best title. And it's from that one line of dialogue. So it's like they're saying that's who the killer is, but it's not telling us who it is. And apparently, I just happened to see that the French release is the longest at 101 minutes, but the one I have is 103, so, okay. Side tangent. But just as they're interrogating the hippies, the inspector gets a call saying Brighton has committed suicide and left a note saying he's responsible. He's the one that killed Julia. And what was the whole reasoning? It gave a reason, but I don't quite remember it. But the last sequence is we see Carol at her father's grave, and the inspector shows up and brings up the phone call. The one that was believed to be blackmail, which we see the inspector talking to her earlier, saying, did anyone know about this phone call? Did your father know about this phone call? We see her say yes, and that's when Brighton walked in. And so that's why they kind of thought that, they kind of went with Brighton committing suicide because the phone call went to him. But turns out he didn't know about the phone call. And so that was Carol's slip that the inspector caught on. So the truth, the final twist of the movie is that Carol had no dreams. She invented the whole thing about dreams beforehand. That way she could kill Carol, create this elaborate dream that makes it sound like the recurring dreams, so that if she is figured out, maybe she could get put away for some sort of mental illness in a clinic instead of prison. And the phone call was going to be blackmail, but it was because of the lesbian relationship that they were having. She did, in fact, know Julia very personally. Which also, the scene with the dinner, with the party and the quiet dinner, when Carol looks angry, it kind of pans down and we see her foot tapping on the floor to the music, as if she wants to be there with her lover. So yeah, and she killed her to keep that black male and the relationship quiet. Saw the hippies, but didn't realize that they were so fried on LSD that, and she thought that they would be able to incriminate her. And then it ends with her being put away in the cop car to be taken away. And also, the dream that we see when she goes to kill Carol, like the swan that we see coming out of the clouds with the shadow chasing her. There's a painting over Julia's bed of a swan. So it's kind of like Usual Suspects, where she's taking all these little tiny details and incorporating them into her dream. So yeah, I think this is definitely one of the better written Giallos that have all these twists and turns. And, for that, I really enjoy it. I thought it was a great story, great acting. Really did well with the dream sequences and also the order of events. Like, it opened up with the trippy dream, so we're already programmed to think that she has these dream and mental issues. Coming to find out she doesn't have them at all. She is the lizard in a woman's skin. She was guilty the whole time. But plenty of red herrings, and it did a good job at making all of them seem just as plausible. But yeah, I really like Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Not sure if I like it more than Don't Torture a Duckling, but I do like that and this more than New York Ripper. I will say I like New York Ripper as just a sleazy, brutal, bloody Giallo. But as far as one that's really well written with a good mystery and story, this and Duckling is up there, especially from Fulci. And Fulci's films are not really known for story, so I will say this is probably the best written story of his. So yeah, 1971's Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Really enjoyed this Giallo. So stay tuned for more Italian horror films and Giallos. And thank you for watching.